How did we get here? If you cast your mind back to the year 2000, you'll probably remember that the world was a very predictable place. We were at the end of history. The Soviet Union was defeated. Things were going to unroll in a definite way. We knew it was going to happen, we just didn't know how long it would take. But somewhere along the line, things changed. Part of it was 9/11, but part of it was something else. And by the end of Obama's second term, things were far more uncertain. We were told the end of history was a time of managed decline. That was kind of a come down. And something didn't seem right. And then came two big shocks. The first was Brexit. Britain left the European Union. For the first time, the globalist world went backwards. The EU, which was arguably the flagship of globalization, had its boundaries shrink. Just think about that. Its boundaries shrank. And then there came the second blow. The second blow was, if anything, even more shocking than the first. It was the election of Donald Trump. This was a complete shock. Do you remember the video of Ben Rhodes sitting outside the convention center, almost speechless, almost unable to coherently explain what happened? He was genuinely surprised. It wasn't a put on, it wasn't staged. This was real. No one, probably not even Trump, anticipated it. But there was something else too. It was not the ordinary loss. Hillary's defeat was not an ordinary electoral defeat. It happened, I think, at just one of those crucial moments when history was at a knife's edge, when the plan had to go just right. The globalist world had to succeed or not succeed, like a re-entry burn. It had to happen or it would fail. But it didn't happen, and here we are. There's no real expectation that we'll go back to that moment again. There isn't enough spare energy to set up that re-entry burn again. You can advance a number of theories for why it happened. You can say, well, Hillary was a bad candidate, or, I don't know, maybe a few $100,000 worth of Facebook ads that the Russian trolls bought tipped the balance because it was so fine. But there's probably something more basic. The underlying reason for Hillary's failure was that the globalist model didn't make sense anymore. And people felt that, except for the bigs who collected the rents. To billions of people, including the middle class in the Western world, it was turning out to be a trip to nowhere. And people sensed that, and you had this kind of preference cascade in 2016 that surprised everybody. Now, you guys know what a preference cascade is. It's when what we're thinking, but we're afraid to say, turns out to be what other people are thinking, and we suddenly discover that this is the real state of play. But however that may be, where to? Quo vadis? Well, here's a couple of theories that I'd like to throw out. What we are witnessing is the emergence of a decentralized world that will coexist and interface with the globalist world in much the same way as distributed information architectures now live side by side with Google. It's not that the old world is going to vanish, that the EU is going to suddenly collapse or go away. Things are going to be a little bit more heterogeneous than that. What's going to happen is that you will have these decentralized structures that will live side by side with the old world. Okay. And one of the reasons this coexistence will come to pass is that nobody wants to destroy the physical layer of the system, the level 1 connections. It's the protocol level, it's the level up that the rebels are modifying, and that will be the field of competition. We can probably expect multiple models to arise in the coming years, and the cold civil war will begin to lose some of its heat when the globalists understand, and the rebels understand, that the monopoly is broken, but there's no sense burning the house down. The challenge is to make the intuitive aversion to damaging the level 1 physical layer explicit, to be conscious of it. As with the deterrence doctrine, it's important to understand the dynamics of the new era in order to survive it. At the end of World War II, the world was changed by the invention of nuclear weapons and their use. But for the first few years after the end of the Second World War, nobody actually knew how to use nuclear weapons. The existing strategists thought, well, they were just bigger conventional bombs. It was only when the intellectual revolution of understanding that this tremendous force could be transmuted into information, made into signaling devices, that the Cold War became survivable through deterrence instead of actual use of nuclear weapons. And so this is what needs to happen. We need to understand that the world has changed, and that we need to create modes of interaction that will preserve the balance so that we can, instead of destroying each other, compete. Well, that's my 2 cents. And I hope that we actually do survive in the coming years, because I think the best is still to come.